The music was soft enough to feel like a memory. Violins drifted through the warm afternoon air, thin and trembling, as if they were afraid to be heard. White ribbons fluttered along the wooden chairs, brushing against each other with a faint whisper. Somewhere close, someone laughed too loudly, the sound sharp and bright like breaking glass. The smell of fresh roses mixed with buttercream frosting and polished wood. Everything looked gentle, perfect, carefully arranged. She stood at the edge of it all, fingers curled around the thin envelope in her hand. No one noticed her arrive. The guests filled the garden in clusters of pastel colors and easy conversations. Mothers adjusted silk shawls. Fathers compared watches. Phones lifted for photos. The world moved in warm circles that never quite opened for her. Even the sun seemed to lean toward the center aisle, where petals were scattered like promises meant for someone else. She checked the small card again. Her name was there, spelled correctly, for once, but there was no table number. A slow breath settled in her chest, heavy and familiar. It felt like the same breath she'd been holding since childhood, the one that came right before realizing the seat at the dinner table had already been taken, the one that followed hearing her sister's name called first, again and again and again. Inside the reception hall, crystal chandeliers glowed like captured stars. The polished floor reflected everything except her. Servers floated past with silver trays, their smiles trained to slide over her shoulder as if she were part of the wall. She moved quietly along the perimeter, heels barely making a sound, scanning rows of assigned tables. Table 1, family of the bride. Table 2, close relatives. Table 3, childhood friends. Laughter burst from each circle like small celebrations she wasn't invited to share. She kept walking. At the very back of the hall, near the tall service doors where the kitchen heat slipped into the room in tired waves, she finally saw it. A narrow table pressed against the wall. No centerpiece. No printed names. Just 3 empty chairs and a folded sign that read, "Extra seating." For a moment, she simply stared. The envelope in her hand crinkled slightly as her grip tightened. Somewhere near the front, the bride's voice rang out, bright, glowing, adored. Applause followed instantly, swelling like a tide that never reached the shore where she stood. Of course, this was where they had put her, not with the family photos, not near the celebration, just close enough to say she'd been invited. She swallowed, forcing the sting in her throat back down, and stepped toward the lonely table. That's when she heard her mother's voice behind her, low, hurried, and edged with irritation. "I told you not to make a scene today. After everything you've already done to this family." Her hand froze on the back of the empty chair. The music kept playing. And suddenly, 10 months of silence felt very, very loud. Her mother's words didn't land like a slap. They landed like something older, like a rule she'd learned before she could spell her own name. Don't cry too loud. Don't talk too much. Don't need anything. Don't ruin the mood. When she was 7, she once spilled a cup of tea on the tablecloth during a holiday meal. The stain spread fast, brown and blooming like a bruise. Her father didn't even look up from his plate. Her mother sighed, slow and theatrical, then turned to her sister with a soft smile. "It's okay, darling," she'd said to the wrong child, wiping her sister's hands even though they were clean. "Go wash up." And then her mother had leaned down close to her ear, breath warm with peppermint, voice quiet enough to be private. "Why are you always like this?" She never forgot that question. It followed her into every room she entered, into every apology she made for things she didn't do, into every silence she swallowed, so someone else could keep laughing. Her sister, Lien, was born with a gift the whole village agreed on. She looked like happiness. Big eyes, soft voice, pretty tears that made adults rush forward with comfort already in their hands. Teachers praised her even when she didn't try. Neighbors brought her fruit and red envelopes during festivals. Old women pinched her cheeks and called her blessing. And she was the extra chair. Not hated, not loved, simply placed where she wouldn't interfere. She remembered standing outside the school auditorium at 13, holding a paper certificate with her name printed on it. She'd won a scholarship test. Her hands shook with pride so fierce it almost hurt. She'd scanned the crowd for her parents. searching for her mother's scarf, her father's tall silhouette. But her mother was on the other side of the room, taking pictures of Lien's performance costume. Her father was clapping for Lien's dance group, smiling wide, as if he'd forgotten his mouth could do that. She'd stood there until the lights dimmed, the certificate damp in her sweaty palms, pride turning slowly into something colder. At home, she tried once. Just once. "I got first place," she'd said, voice careful, eyes lowered. Her mother had paused while stirring soup. "That's nice," she'd replied, as if commenting on the weather. Then she called out louder, "Lien, come taste this. You have a sensitive tongue." Later that night, her sister found the scholarship letter on her bed. Lien held it between two fingers like it was something dirty. "You don't have to try so hard," her sister whispered, smiling without warmth. "It makes people uncomfortable." Even now, in the wedding hall, that same discomfort hovered around her like a smell no perfume could cover. She could feel it in the way people glanced and then looked away too quickly, in the way her own mother spoke to her like she was a problem that needed managing. Her mother's shadow fell across the empty chair. "You will sit where you're told," she said, voice low, "and you will be grateful you're allowed to be here at all." Grateful, the word tightened in her chest. And then her mother added, softer, almost like a warning meant only for her, "Don't forget what people already think about you." Her fingers went cold around the envelope, because she did remember, and she knew exactly what they meant. She lowered herself into the chair slowly, as if any sudden movement might draw attention she didn't want. The metal legs scraped softly against the polished floor. No one turned. The music swelled again, covering the sound, wrapping the room in a warm, glowing hum that never reached a corner. From here, the celebration looked like something happening behind glass, visible, bright, and untouchable. A server passed and set down a glass of water in front of her, without a word. No wine, no place setting, just water, sweating quietly under the chandelier's distant light. She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. At the front of the hall, her sister stood near the stage in a cloud of silk and delicate embroidery. Lien's smile shimmered under the lights, practiced and flawless. Guests leaned toward her like sunflowers chasing warmth. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted a compliment about how lucky the groom was. Lien laughed, that same gentle, musical laugh that had opened every door since childhood. The bride's mother dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Her father stood straight, proud, chest lifted as though today proved something important about their family, about their perfect daughter. A distant cousin slid into the chair beside her at the extra table, phone already in hand. He glanced at her, recognition flickering for half a second before politeness faded into awkward neutrality. "Oh, you came," he muttered, like it surprised him. She nodded once. He hesitated, then leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper that still felt too loud. "I heard things," he said carefully. "Must be hard. After what happened." Her throat tightened, but she kept her expression still. Rumors had moved faster than truth ever could. They always did. 10 months ago, whispers began like a faint breeze through the village market. By evening, they were a storm. By morning, they were facts everyone believed. Drugged, pregnant, shameless, thrown out. Each word had stuck to her name like mud, impossible to wash off no matter how silent she stayed. The cousin cleared his throat, uncomfortable with her lack of response, and quickly stood again. "I should go sit with my family," he said, already stepping away. Of course. Everyone had somewhere else to be. She exhaled slowly and let her gaze drift across the hall. Near the entrance, a tall floral arrangement framed the doorway. White lilies, pale roses, trailing ivy. For a moment, the sight tugged at something buried deep in her memory. White flowers, cold night air, headlights cutting through darkness. A man's voice, weak but urgent. Her fingers brushed unconsciously against her right hand, against the simple ring she still wore. It was plain, almost forgettable, a thin band of silver dulled by months of wear. Most people assumed it was cheap, meaningless. Some thought it was proof of her so-called scandal. No one had ever asked where it came from. No one except a village officer who laughed when she told him she didn't know the man's name, Her thumb traced the ring's edge now, slow and careful, like touching a secret that still breathed. At the front, the host tapped the microphone. Feedback squealed, sharp and sudden, slicing through the soft music. Conversations quieted. Chairs shifted. All eyes turned toward the stage. "Before we begin," the host announced brightly, "the bride has something special she wants to say about family." Lien stepped forward, bouquet trembling just enough to look emotional. Her sister's gaze swept across the room, and then it landed directly on her. The smile didn't fade, but something colder flickered underneath it. The microphone caught the soft sound of Lien's breath before her voice arrived. Gentle, trembling, perfectly measured. "I just want to thank everyone who supported me," she began, eyes shining under the lights. "Family is everything to me." A ripple of approving murmurs moved through the crowd. Someone sniffed. Someone clapped too early, from a back table. The words felt strangely hollow, like hearing a song through a closed door. Lien dabbed at the corner of her eye with practiced grace. "Growing up, I always believed family means standing by each other, protecting each other's honor, and making sacrifices when things go wrong." Her sister paused there, letting the silence stretch just long enough to invite curiosity. Then her gaze drifted again, slowly, deliberately, until it rested on her. The room followed. It wasn't sudden. It was worse. It was gradual, like a tide pulling attention away from the stage and toward the lonely chair at the wall. A few guests twisted in their seats. Others leaned sideways to see. The whispering started as a faint rustle, like dry leaves. Lien's voice softened further. "Sometimes," she said, "families also have to endure embarrassment, painful things that test our strength. But today is about forgiveness, about moving forward." Her mother nodded in the front row, lips pressed into a proud, emotional line, as if the speech proved how gracious her daughter was. The host smiled encouragingly. "Beautifully said." Lien inhaled, then added, almost shyly, "I know not everyone here understands what we've been through these past months, but we chose to handle it quietly, with dignity." The word quietly landed like a stone. Several heads turned fully now. No more pretending. Her pulse thudded slow and heavy in her ears, but her body stayed still. She had learned that skill early, how to sit through discomfort without moving, without giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing it hurt. Lien tilted her head, voice gentle enough to sound kind. "My sister came today," she said. A collective shift rippled through the room. "There were times," Lien continued, "when I wasn't sure she would. After everything, I thought maybe she'd prefer to stay away. For everyone's sake." A small, sympathetic laugh floated from somewhere near the front. Someone whispered, "Poor bride." Her mother finally turned in her seat, just enough to send her a warning look over her shoulder. Sharp, silent, familiar. "Don't speak. Don't react. Don't ruin this." Lien's smile warmed again, as if she were offering mercy. "But she's here," she said softly, "and I want her to know, no matter what mistakes were made, she's still family." Applause broke out. Warm, supportive, relieved. It sounded like kindness. It felt like exposure, because the unspoken words hung heavier than anything she'd actually said. The pregnant sister, the disgrace, the problem we tolerated. Her fingers tightened in her lap until her knuckles paled. The ring pressed cool against her skin, a small, steady weight grounding her while the room watched to see if she would shrink. For a second, she almost did. Almost. Then Lien added one last line, voice sweet as honey and twice as sticky. "I just hope," she said, "that from today onward, she can finally learn to take responsibility for her choices." The applause swelled again, and somewhere deep inside her, something that had stayed silent for 10 months shifted. Not loudly, but permanently. The applause faded in gentle waves, dissolving back into music and chatter, as if nothing sharp had just been placed in the center of the room. People turned forward again. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed near the stage. The world resumed its celebration. But inside her, something had gone very still. She lowered her gaze to the table, watching a droplet of condensation slide slowly down her untouched glass of water. It trembled at the bottom edge, clinging there, caught between falling and staying. For a strange moment, she understood that drop better than anything else in the room. 10 months. 10 months of silence had taught her how to live like that, suspended, unseen, holding the weight of something no one wanted to hear. Her sister's words should have burned. Instead, they felt like the final confirmation of something she had already known the night she left home with nothing but a small bag and the dull silver ring on her finger. No one had asked what really happened. Not her parents, not the neighbors, not even a village officer who'd written her statement with a bored expression and a pen that kept running out of ink. They had only asked how quickly she could disappear. She exhaled slowly, shoulders loosening, as if releasing a breath she'd been saving for this exact moment. At the front, Lien was already glowing again, hugging guests, posing for photos, slipping easily back into the warm center of attention. The speech had done its job. The narrative was sealed. The bride was gracious. The family was dignified. The embarrassing sister was tolerated at the back. Everything neat. Everything resolved. Except it wasn't. Her fingers slid into her coat pocket and brushed against the folded paper hidden there. The edges were worn soft from being handled too many times. She didn't pull out yet. She didn't need to. She knew every line printed on it, every date, every name. Proof didn't need to shout to be real. Across the hall, a large screen flickered to life, displaying childhood photos of Lien, birthday cakes, school awards, family trips where everyone leaned inward toward her smile. She spotted herself in one corner of a beach picture, half cut off, looking like someone accidentally included in the frame. A faint, humorless breath escaped her. Of course, that had always been her place. Almost outside the picture, her thumb traced the ring again, slower this time. She remembered the cold wave being pressed into her palm, remembered a man's voice, hoarse with urgency, insisting she take it. Remembered headlights flashing across wet asphalt and the metallic smell of blood in the night air. If anything happens, this will prove it, he'd whispered. At the time, she thought it was just shock talking. Now, sitting in the shadow of her sister's perfect wedding, the memory felt less like chaos and more like the beginning of something unfinished. Near the entrance, the reception doors opened briefly as a staff member slipped inside. Cool daylight spilled across the floor in a bright rectangle before the doors swung shut again. For a split second, she thought she saw movement outside. Dark suits, purposeful steps, the faint glint of official badges. She blinked. The doors were closed again. The music played on. Probably nothing. Still a small, unfamiliar calm settled into her chest. Not hope, something steadier. Like the quiet moment, right before a storm changes direction. She reached for her water at last, lifting the glass with hands that no longer trembled. And for the first time that day, she allowed herself a single, private thought. I don't have to stay silent anymore. The smell of disinfectant always brought it back. Even now, as a server wiped a nearby table with something sharp and sterile, the scent slipped into her lungs and pulled her backward, not gently, but all at once. Rain against her face, cold pavement under her palms, voices fading into darkness. 10 months earlier, the night had begun with laughter. Her sister had insisted she come to the small engagement dinner. Just family, Lien said sweetly, fingers curling around her wrist. We should fix things between us before my wedding, don't you think? It felt strange, but hopeful. Lien rarely asked for peace. Their mother had even smiled that evening, setting out the good plates, pouring tea herself. For a moment, it almost looked like the family she used to imagine they could be. She remembered the tea clearly. Jasmine, light steam, a faint bitterness beneath the sweetness. You look tired, Lien had murmured, watching her too closely. Drink. You need to relax. She did. 1 cup, then half of another. The room softened soon after, edges blurring like wet paint. Her limbs felt heavy, thoughts slow and slippery. She tried to stand, but the floor tilted strangely beneath her feet. I think something's wrong, she whispered. Her mother's voice came from far away. You're always dramatic. Lien's hand appeared at her elbow, steady, guiding. It's okay, her sister said softly. I'll help you lie down. The next memory arrived in broken flashes. Dark hallway, a door closing, the smell of unfamiliar cologne, a man's voice she didn't recognize. Then nothing. When she woke, dawn had already thinned the sky to gray. Her head throbbed. Her throat felt raw. She was lying on a narrow bed in a small roadside clinic, a rough blanket tucked around her. An old fan hummed above, clicking every few seconds like a clock that couldn't keep proper time. A nurse noticed her stirring. "Oh, good," the woman said, relief softening her tired face. "You're awake. Someone brought you in last night. Said he found you unconscious near the road." Near the road? Her mind struggled to piece itself together. "The man," she croaked. The nurse hesitated. "He left before sunrise. Looked injured himself. Refused treatment. Just kept asking if you were breathing." A strange image flickered through her foggy thoughts. Headlights cutting through rain, a shadow kneeling beside her, hands warm despite the cold. "He paid your clinic fee," the nurse added. "Left this too. Said you must keep it safe." That was when the nurse placed the ring in her palm. Cold, solid, too heavy to be cheap. She'd stared at it, confused, while the nurse explained they found no ID on the man. No name, no number, just urgency in his voice and blood on his sleeve. "You're lucky he found you," the nurse had said quietly. Another hour in that rain. The sentence never finished. By afternoon, her parents arrived, not with relief, with fury. Her mother's first words weren't, "Are you okay?" They were, "What did you do?" Lien stood behind them, eyes glossy, lips trembling, the picture of wounded innocence. And by evening, the story had already changed. Not she was found unconscious, but she disappeared with a man. Not someone saved her life, but she brought shame to the family. Sitting now in the wedding hall, her fingers pressed hard against that same ring, the metal cool and steady against her skin. For months, she'd wondered if the man who saved her was real or just a half-remembered shadow from a broken night, until 3 weeks ago, when she saw his face. On every screen in the country, the hall dimmed slightly as the slideshow ended, and for a moment the large screen above the stage went black. In that brief pause, her memory filled it instead. 3 weeks ago, she had been standing in a small electronics shop near the bus station, waiting for the rain to stop. The place smelled like plastic packaging and dust. A tiny television hung from the ceiling, volume low, captions flickering beneath a news anchor's serious expression. She hadn't meant to pay attention until the photo appeared. A man in a dark suit, calm eyes, a faint scar near his brow. The kind of face people trusted without knowing why. Beneath him, bold text scrolled. Billionaire CEO announces public reward. Searching for woman who saved his life 10 months ago. Her breath had stopped mid-inhale. The anchor continued, voice steady. Industrialist Chinwei was critically injured in a roadside attack last year. According to a statement, an unidentified woman pulled him from his vehicle and stayed with him until help arrived, saving his life. He claims the woman disappeared before he could learn her name. Today, he has offered a substantial reward to anyone who can help locate her. The shop owner muttered, impressed. Lucky woman. Imagine saving a man like that. But she wasn't hearing him anymore, because the screen cut to a second image. A damaged black car under police lights, rain streaking the windshield, and suddenly the broken pieces in her mind snapped into place. The headlights, the metallic smell, the weight of someone's arm over her shoulder as she dragged him toward the roadside, the sound of his breathing, shallow but stubborn, the way he'd pressed something into her shaking hand. If anything happens, this will prove it. Her fingers had curled tightly around the ring, even then, hidden in her coat pocket. On the television, the CEO spoke directly to the camera, voice low but unwavering. To the woman who helped me that night. You were injured too. You disappeared before I woke. I've searched hospitals, police reports, everywhere. If you see this, please come forward. I owe you my life. The screen froze on his face. Alive. Real. Looking for her. She'd stumbled out of the shop into the rain, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the traffic. For 10 months, she believed the night had only taken from her home, her reputation, her safety. But now, It had left her with something undeniable. Proof she hadn't imagined it. Proof someone knew the truth of that night. Back in the wedding hall, the screen flickered on again, now showing the couple's engagement photos. Applause rose softly as guests admired them. No one noticed her hand trembling slightly as she slipped a folded newspaper clipping from her pocket. Chun Wei's printed face looked back at her, the headline still sharp despite the creases. She glanced from the paper to the ring, then toward the reception doors again. This time, they opened wider. 2 men in dark suits stepped inside, scanning the room with quiet purpose. Behind them, a woman in a neat gray blazer spoke softly into her phone, eyes moving from table to table. Not guests, not staff. Searching. A slow, steady realization settled deep in her chest. He hadn't stopped looking. And somehow, the search had finally reached her sister's wedding. The doors closed softly behind the suited visitors, but the air in the hall felt different now. Thinner somehow, like the room had taken a careful breath and forgotten to release it. Most guests didn't notice. They were busy watching the couple move toward the cake, laughing as a photographer directed them into gentle, romantic poses. Forks tapped against plates. Glasses chimed. Someone called for more champagne. Normal sounds. Ordinary joy. But at the back table, her world had narrowed to the quiet rhythm of her own pulse. The woman in the gray blazer spoke briefly with a staff member near the entrance. A discreet nod followed. Then another. No raised voices. No dramatic gestures. Just calm, professional movements that felt heavier than any announcement could be. They were confirming something. Her fingers tightened slightly around the newspaper clipping before she folded it again and slipped it back into her pocket. The paper felt warm now, like it had absorbed her hesitation, along with the heat of her hand. For 10 months, she had survived by staying small, keeping her head down, letting the story about her exist because fighting alone felt like shouting into a storm. She'd told herself it didn't matter anymore what people believed, that she only needed to get through each day quietly, protect the life growing inside her, and build something steady from nothing. But watching those officials move carefully through the room, she felt the fragile wall she'd built around her silence begin to loosen, not crumble, just open at the front. Lien lifted the knife with the groom's hand over hers. Guests leaned forward, smiling, phones raised. The cake was tall and delicate, layers of white and gold, almost too perfect to touch. "Smile," the photographer called. The couple laughed. The knife pressed down. Applause burst out as the first slice came free, clean and triumphant. In the same moment, the gray blazer woman stepped fully into the aisle. She didn't rush, didn't interrupt. She simply waited at the edge of the gathering, posture straight, expression composed, the quiet authority of someone used to being listened to when the time came. One of the suited men leaned toward the host and murmured something. The host's cheerful smile faltered just slightly. Confusion flickered across his face. Then he tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice still pleasant but now threaded with uncertainty, "we seem to have a brief situation that needs clarification. It will only take a moment." A ripple of puzzled murmurs spread across the hall. Lien's brows knit delicately, still holding the cake knife. "Is something wrong?" she asked lightly, laughter trying to smooth the moment. The gray blazer woman stepped forward, heels quiet but firm against the polished floor. "We're looking for someone," she said calmly, her voice carrying even without the microphone. "We believe she may be present here today." The room hushed in pieces, conversation snapping off table by table. Her breath slowed. Not panic, not fear, just a strange stillness of a truth finally catching up. "Her name," the woman continued, glancing down at a small tablet before lifting her eyes to scan the crowd, "is," she spoke it clearly, "her name." Every head in the hall turned, and for the first time that afternoon, there was nowhere left to hide. For one long second, no one moved. Her name seemed to hover in the air, fragile and unmistakable, like a glass about to fall but not yet shattered. Then the room erupted in whispers. "Her. Why are they looking for her? I thought she—" Chairs scraped. Necks craned. Even the photographer lowered his camera, lens drifting toward the back of the hall, where she still sat beside her untouched glass of water. At the front, Lien's smile faltered for the first time all day. Only a flicker, but real. The groom leaned toward her, murmuring something tight and confused. Lien shook her head faintly, as if trying to dismiss the moment back into order. The gray blazer woman spoke again, calm and precise. "We apologize for the interruption. This concerns an ongoing private search. We were informed this individual might be attending today." Her eyes found her, not accusing, not judging, certain. "There you are," she said gently. The words didn't feel like a demand. They felt like recognition. A soft ripple parted the crowd as people shifted aside, creating an accidental aisle that led straight from the stage to the lonely extra table at the wall. Her mother stood halfway from her seat, face already tightening with alarm. "What is this about?" she demanded, voice sharp with protective outrage. "Why are you calling my daughter during a wedding?" Not which daughter. Everyone knew. The gray blazer woman inclined her head politely. "Ma'am, we only need a moment to confirm her identity." Lien stepped forward then, silk rustling, bouquet trembling slightly now for real. "This must be some mistake," she said quickly, voice sweet but strained. "My sister isn't involved in anything important. She's been unwell. Perhaps you were given the wrong information." The words sounded caring. They felt like erasure. Across the hall, dozens of eyes pressed into her, heavy and curious. The same people who had whispered about her for months now waited to see what new story would unfold. Her heartbeat remained steady. Slow, clear, she rose from her chair. The movement was simple, but it sliced through the room louder than any shout. Conversations died completely. Even the faint hum of the air conditioner seemed to pause. She stepped forward once, twice. Each footfall echoed softly on the polished floor as she walked toward the aisle opening. The ring on her finger caught the chandelier light, flashing briefly, a small, silver spark that somehow drew the gray blazer woman's attention immediately. The woman's expression shifted. Recognition sharpened. "May I?" she asked softly, gesturing toward her hand. She hesitated only a breath before lifting it. The woman leaned closer, eyes fixed on the ring's inner edge, where a tiny engraved mark sat almost invisible unless you knew to look. The suited man exchanged a quick glance, and then the woman straightened, voice steady but now carrying unmistakable certainty. "This is the one," she said. A stunned hush crashed over the hall. Lien's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Her mother whispered, almost breathless, "The one for what?" The gray blazer woman turned slightly toward the stage, then back to her, tone respectful. "Our employer has been searching for you for 10 months, she said. "Mr. Chunwei would like to thank the woman who saved his life." The words fell into the center of the wedding like thunder, without warning. Saved his life. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered somewhere near the front. And suddenly, the story everyone believed about her began to crack. The broken glass kept ringing faintly against the floor, tiny shards settling into silence. No one rushed to clean it. No one moved at all. "Save his life?" her mother repeated, the words sounding foreign in her mouth, like a language she didn't trust. The gray blazer woman nodded once, professional but gentle. "Yes. 10 months ago, Mr. Chunwei survived a targeted attack on a remote highway. His car was forced off the road during heavy rain. According to the investigation, he would not have lived if someone hadn't pulled him from the vehicle and stayed with him until help arrived." A tremor ran through the crowd. Phones were already lifting, recording. The woman continued, voice clear enough for the entire hall to hear. Mr. Chun woke in the hospital asking for the woman who saved him. She had already disappeared. The only thing linking her to that night was the ring he gave her before losing consciousness. Every eye dropped to her hand again. The thin silver band suddenly looked very different under the chandelier light. The groom frowned, confusion deepening. "Lien, you said your sister ran off with some stranger that night." Lien's lips parted, then closed. I only repeated what we were told," she said quickly. "She came home late, disoriented, none of it made sense." Her voice wavered for the first time, because it hadn't happened that way. Not even close. The gray blazer woman tapped her tablet once, then turned the screen outward. A photo appeared, rain-soaked roadside, flashing police lights, and a blurry security capture from a nearby toll camera. In the image, a woman knelt beside an injured man, her coat soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her hands pressed firmly against his shoulder to keep him conscious. Even blurred, the outline was unmistakable. A soft, collective inhale swept through the hall. That footage was recovered during the investigation, the woman said. We spent months enhancing it, cross-checking hospital reports, following every lead. 3 weeks ago, we traced a clinic visit where this woman was treated the same night. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth because she remembered that clinic. She remembered arriving furious, remembered never asking why her daughter had been there in the first place. The woman's voice softened slightly as she looked at her again. You left before giving your name, she said. But Mr. Chin never stopped searching. He asked us to find you, no matter how long it took. Not just a thank you, but to return what that night cost you. A long, trembling silence followed. At the front, Lien's bouquet dipped lower, petals shaking visibly now. The groom looked between the sisters, then at Lien, something unsettled forming behind his eyes. Why did we know this? He asked quietly. Lien swallowed. She never said, I tried. The words left her mouth before she even realized she'd spoken. Not loud, but clear. The room froze again, because it was the first time anyone there had heard her voice all day. She met her mother's stunned gaze, then her sister's. I tried to explain, she said softly, that morning, at the clinic, but no one wanted to listen. Her mother's face drained of color, memory catching up in painful fragments. The accusation, the shouting, the door closing behind her. 10 months of silence suddenly didn't look like guilt anymore. It looked like something else entirely. The gray blazer woman stepped aside slightly. Mr. Chin is on his way, she announced. The doors at the back opened once more, and this time everyone turned. The room didn't breathe. It simply watched. Through the open doors, a small group stepped inside, quiet, composed, unmistakably important. The suited men from earlier straightened instantly. Guests shifted aside without being asked, forming a path as natural as water parting around stone. At the center of them walked a man in a dark coat. No dramatic entrance, no raised voice, just a steady presence that carried its own gravity. Chun-Wei looked exactly like he had on the news. Calm eyes, faint scar near his brow, posture straight but not proud. The kind of stillness that came from someone who had faced death once and learned what mattered afterward. His gaze moved across the hall slowly, searching. Not for the bride, not for the stage. For her. When his eyes finally found her, something in his expression softened. Not surprise, not relief exactly, but recognition settling into certainty. He stopped a few steps away, close enough that she could see the thin, pale line of the healed wound near his temple. Close enough to remember the rain on his face that night. The weight of his arm over her shoulder, the stubborn way he'd forced himself to stay conscious while she dragged him toward the roadside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wedding hall, once so loud with celebration, had fallen into a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. Then Chun-Wei inclined his head slightly. It was you, he said quietly. Not a question, a simple truth. Her fingers curled reflexively, the silver ring cool against her skin. Yes, she answered, voice steady despite the 100 eyes pressing into her back. A breath left him, almost a laugh but softer, like something heavy finally set down. I thought I might never find you, he admitted. You disappear before I could even thank you. Around them, the crowd shifted, absorbing each word like it might rewrite the last 10 months. Chun-Wei reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn photograph. The same blurred toll camera image the assistant had shown earlier, but printed and carefully kept. He glanced at it once, then back at her. I owe you my life, he said. Everything after that night exists because you didn't walk away. She shook her head faintly. I almost did, she confessed. I was barely conscious myself. But you didn't, he replied. The simplicity of it carried more weight than any speech. Behind her, she heard her mother sink slowly into a chair. A small, broken sound escaped the woman's throat. Not loud enough to interrupt, but enough to carry regret in its shape. The groom looked at Lien now with a searching, unsettled expression. "You told me she ran off with someone," he murmured, disbelief threading through his voice. "You said that's why the family—" I didn't know," Lien whispered, but the words sounded thinner now, fragile under the truth standing in front of everyone, because the story she protected for 10 months no longer held. Chun Wei's assistant stepped forward and handed him a sealed envelope. He accepted it, then turned back to her. "This won't erase what you went through," he said gently, "but I hope it helps restore what was taken from you. Your name, your safety, your future." He offered the envelope with both hands. She hesitated, then accepted it slowly, the paper heavier than its size suggested. Inside, she already sensed, was more than money. It was acknowledgement, proof, a public correction the entire hall had just witnessed. For the first time since she'd walked in, the whispers around her had changed. Not shame, not pity, awe, respect, and something else. Understanding arriving far too late. She exhaled quietly, feeling the strange, unfamiliar warmth of being believed settle into her chest. Not loud, not triumphant, just right. The music hadn't resumed. No one seemed to know how. The cake still stood half-cut at the front of the hall, its perfect layers exposed and forgotten. Lien remained frozen beside it, bouquet drooping slightly now, like even the flowers understood the moment had shifted beyond repair. But the center of the room was no longer the stage. It was her, not because she demanded it, because the truth had finally reached her without asking permission. She held the envelope carefully, feeling the soft thickness of official paper inside. Around her, the air felt different, no longer tight with judgment, no longer heavy with whispers she couldn't answer. Chun Wei gave a small, respectful nod. "If you're willing," he said, voice low enough to remain gentle despite the silent audience. "My team can help arrange medical care, housing, anything you need. I was told you've been handling a lot alone." Her hand drifted unconsciously to her abdomen, subtle, protective. A few nearby guests noticed. A faint murmur spread, this time not sharp, not cruel, just realization unfolding. "Yes," she said softly. "I have." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. "Then you won't have to anymore," he replied simply. Behind her, a chair scraped suddenly. Her mother stood, steps unsteady as she approached. For once, there was no authority in her posture, no rehearsed dignity. Only a woman seeing her own daughter clearly for the first time in months, maybe years. Her mother's voice cracked, the word barely forming. "Why didn't you tell us the truth?" The question hung there, fragile and almost childlike. She met her mother's eyes calmly. "I did," she answered. "You just believed the easier story." Silence followed, not harsh, just honest. Her mother's shoulders folded inward slightly, as if the weight of that realization had finally settled where it belonged. No dramatic apology came, no sudden embrace, just the quiet beginning of understanding. Sometimes that was heavier. Across the hall, the groom stepped back from Lien, expression no longer certain. Guests watched in hushed curiosity, the perfect wedding image now cracked by something far more real than scandal. Truth. But she didn't stay to watch what happened next. She didn't need to. For 10 months, her life had been defined by what others decided she was. Today, without raising her voice, without accusing anyone, she had stepped out of that story. Chun Wei's assistant gently gestured toward the doors. "Whenever you're ready," she said kindly. She nodded once. Then she turned and began walking, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. Each step felt lighter than the last. At the doorway, she paused briefly, glancing back one final time. Not at her sister, not at the stage, just at the room itself. The place where she'd once felt smaller than her own shadow. It looked different now, or maybe she did. Outside, the afternoon light felt warm on her face, the air fresh with a faint scent of rain far away. Somewhere in the distance, traffic hummed, ordinary life continuing as it always did. She slipped the ring gently between her fingers, no longer a secret, no longer a question. Some injustices didn't end with revenge. Some ended with being seen, with walking forward, with knowing the truth had finally caught up. She breathed in slowly, then stepped into the light, carrying not just her future, but the quiet certainty that sometimes the world does come back around. And maybe the real question isn't whether justice arrives, but whether we still have the courage to stand when it does. If you were in her place, would you have spoken sooner, or waited for the truth to find its moment?